right, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today we've had two powerful panel sessions, one keynote speech, and we're about to move on to our next session of the day that speaks on Africa's moment in global education, and that's our second keynote speech for the day, and it is themed Africa's moment in global education, from systems to scale to global influence. This keynote speech connects these 3 points together, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our second keynote speech for this keynote session. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for Bola Njideofor? I apologize. Thank you very much. A round of applause for her, ladies and gentlemen, and that's our second keynote speaker for today.
Good afternoon. The room looks very sleepy. Are you guys awake? Okay, perfect. While the presentation comes up, I'll just do a brief introduction because I'm not sure if you really heard what she said. So my name is Bola Njideofor. I'm the operations director for Bloombreed schools in Port Harcourt. We are a Christian school, co-ed, with over 1,000 students, and we're really focused on building the total child. We run a boarding school and also a day school, and we are the first Google reference school in Nigeria. And what that means is that we ensure that we use Google tools, and Google has recognized us globally for this, our ways of using Google tools to really transform how we teach. Today, I will be going right into it. So I really want to talk about Africa's role in global education. But to really talk about that, my theme for the conversation today is Africa is not waiting for the future of education. We are currently building it. Okay, so in Africa, we actually have a very, very strong advantage, right? And the reason why I believe that we're not waiting for the future of education is because there are a lot of challenges right now in the 21st century. You know, how do you educate a rapidly changing, digitally connected population in a very, very diverse world? But if you look at Africa as a continent, we actually hold the key to this challenge. We have the youngest and fastest growing population, but more importantly, we have the creativity to solve the problem. So let's talk about how we are building, then we'll look at the gaps, and then we'll also conclude with some key next steps. Now, Africans lead in many different ways, right? So anytime an African teacher logs onto a virtual platform, like we've heard from different panelists, they're guiding a child across the globe in math, coding. While we're doing that, we're building a future. Every time a young founder designs a low data, offline learning tool that helps a rural community, we are also building a future. Every time a teacher in an under-resourced classroom uses their pure genius to spark creativity, we are also building a future. Now let's talk about potential. African students have the opportunity to thrive better when the surrounding and the environment works in their favor, which is, you know, it's normal. And we have proven time and time again that our children, if placed in the right environment, can top the classes and break records. I don't know if you all have been following the recent trends. There was a STEM competition, I think, in Rome. Nigerian students are getting gold everywhere, topping the charts. I also saw one on a spelling bee. There has been Elizabeth math competitions. Nigerians are everywhere. And it's really based on how we teach and the resilience that we have to ensure that we really excel. But beyond education, let me take it back to, let's even look at the World Cup, right? When the World Cup happens, how many of you guys watched the World Cup? Not everybody. What happened? Okay, most people. Okay, when you look at the World Cup, for instance, and you look at the number of African descent players in the different teams, I went online to quickly check, and I saw that France had 21 out of 26 African players. England had 15. Switzerland had 9. Belgium and Germany had 7. So what I was just trying to point across is that when talent meets opportunity, greatness is definitely guaranteed. But you can't do this, you know, without the teachers. So let's look at the teachers, and let's look at what teachers are doing. Are there any teachers in the room? Where are the teachers? Okay, perfect. Well done to you all. So I sit on the board for Teach for Nigeria, And the impact that we're making is incredible. So Teach for Nigeria, our mission is to ensure that every single Nigerian child, regardless of socioeconomic status, has access to quality education, right? So over the last 9 years, we have deployed almost 3,000 fellows and to over 800 public schools. And what this has done is that it has transformed almost 500,000 lives. Now, these Teach for Nigeria fellows are incredible. I'll just touch a bit on some of their achievements. We have Akeem Badru, who won the Cambridge Dedicated Teacher Award, where he emerged as the global winner out of 11,000 nominations from 99 countries. And this was a teacher who was teaching in rural Ogun State village, where they lacked basic amenities, but he created the First Steps initiative to teach hands-on STEM and build clean water for his pupils. So I just wanted to show the impact of our teachers and what they can do regardless of the resources that they have. And the other fellows, I mean, some have built local ICT centers, and they've really changed the way low-income communities think, and they've gone ahead to win different debate competitions, regional tech competitions, etc. So the point is that the educators and the young learners can prove to us daily that we don't always need Western intervention, we don't need Western infrastructure all the time to produce world-class outcomes. We do it because we're resilient. We do it because we have a lot of community innovation. And we also have the mastery. So don't let anybody tell you that Africans don't know what they're doing. So I also want to use my school as an example. So we have this program where we bring in children from the actual community. I mean, the real community. It's not a fake program, right? And we've done it for over 11 years. And we've brought in, I think, close to 200 students and graduated over 100. So these students are from the community. They've lacked sort of basic foundation in math, English, etc. The English isn't great. You're bringing them to a private school in Port Harcourt. You know, just imagine the mindset. There's a lot of things we need to work on. But the real impact is after they've been in the school for 6 years, some of them have become head boy, they've become head girls, they've held different prefectship positions, they've won math award, English, so they literally fly. And what we have to realize is sometimes our environment hinders our growth, but if you can really change that, it'll truly make a lot of difference. So while we are building, and I'm all in support for Africa, but I think that we still have some things to do. You can move to the next slide, please. In Nigeria alone, with over 20 million students out of school, children out of school, 20 million, that's a lot of people wandering the streets. We face massive infrastructure gaps, power instability, and the list goes on and on. But can you imagine if this 20 million out of school children were given the chance to go to school, to learn in an environment where they can grow and where they can thrive? Can you imagine the endless possibilities and the groundbreaking achievements we would unlock across Nigeria and beyond? Can you internalize that? 20 million students. Give them an opportunity to go to school, and let's see how this nation will transform. And you know, when I talk about these 20 million children, it really reminds me about what Nelson Mandela has told the world. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I know we have other problems, but education, it is so important, and I find that we overlook it because, you know, we have different things. We don't have light, we don't have this, we don't have that. But we need to educate our children if we really want to move Nigeria and Africa forward. So we don't have everything figured out, like I said, but I think our resilience, our hustle mentality, creative problem is really what drives the continent. So when you open the classrooms, like I said, next slide, you've opened the classrooms, but now you need to figure out, next slide, okay. You've opened the classrooms, now you need to figure out how are you going to turn this raw potential into global influence. And to talk about that, I want to look at 3 fundamental pillars. The first one is you need systems that work, you need models that scale, and you need African voices that can actually lead the global conversation. So let's first talk about the systems that work, right? You know, there's this thing that we do in Nigeria or in most schools, where we only take, we just want to take the top 10%. We want all the smart kids in the school. Does it make sense? A lot of schools do that, right? But my question is, if you're taking a child at 90%, right, and they leave at 95%, what have you really done? Are you just working on what was already there? Whereas if you take a child who enters at 40% and leaves at, 70, 80%, and they're topping their class, that is where transformation really lives, and that is where you scale impact. I'm not saying that schools should, change what they're doing, but it's just something that we need to think about. We shouldn't forget the people in the middle, because the people in the middle are more than the people on top. So we need to make sure that we have the right programs in place to ensure that people in the middle can also excel and make it to the top. Now let's look at our systems. Okay, let's look at our systems, right? In order to build systems that transform every student, we need to use technology intelligently, but technology needs to match our environment. I know there are loads of tech founders in here, and I know you really understand what I'm talking about, but I think we need to look deeper. Is technology the problem, or can technology really help us solve the problem that we have? Because, for instance, when I went to one of our schools in Makoko, technology isn't what they need. They need the basic infrastructure. The students need to understand why they're in school. They communicate in a different language that I'd never heard in my life. There's so many issues that technology cannot fix. So you need to fix the underlying problems first, and then bring in technology to help you progress further. So I think it's important to look at the root cause before we scale into any market and just, provide technology. Imagine giving a tab to a child who doesn't know what a tab is, or you give it to a teacher who has never used a tab before in the rural community. What are we really doing? We are not solving the problem. So you have to solve the problem first and then layer it with technology to make it lifelong and to make it more permanent. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about our ecosystems, right? So in order to scale, like I said before, we need models that scale. If you have one thing that you cannot replicate thousands of times without losing quality, then you are not scaling. So what I find is that in Nigeria especially, we have many islands of excellence. We have these brilliant individual schools achieving phenomenal results. But the thing is that once excellence is isolated, you can never transform a continent. Are there any other school owners or school leaders here? No? Okay. But I had a question, though, for everybody else in the room. And I'm sure you've all sort of felt this way. So there's this fear of collaboration, and I think somebody else mentioned it on one of the panels. So, if I let my staff go and join this training institute, or if I share my great ideas with another school owner, will they poach my staff? Will they steal my ideas? Those are things that it's reality. But the thing is that if we continue thinking in that way, we can never scale as a continent. We are all fighting the exact same talent war. We're looking for great educators, but we're fighting it in isolated silos. Talent is hard to find, right? But why are we fighting over a small pool of teachers instead of coming together to expand the pool for everyone? This competition that we do, right, ensures that we don't build a large ecosystem. So I wanted to give you some examples of different spaces that are doing it. Can you move to the next slide? Okay, so if you look at Japan, right, they have this thing called practice lesson study, where teachers from different schools sit in other classrooms and refine lesson plans together. Can we do that in Nigeria? Can we do it? Is it possible? Teachers in the house, is it really possible? No, it's not. It's a good to have, but the reality on ground, right? So let's look at Singapore. Singapore takes competing schools into clusters, and they rotate the master teachers across them so that every child receives world-class education. Can we do that in Nigeria? Why? Why can't we do it? Too competitive, right? Yeah, people don't want to collaborate. Okay, but if you look at the UK and the US, I think this one might be a bit more feasible for us. So they have this trusts and network where they pool resources for teacher training, tech, curriculum development, and they put it all together so that everybody can share talent and really train the teachers. So when I looked at that, I thought, okay, that seems more Nigerian friendly. But the point is just to show that these countries have realized that in order to lift an entire nation, they must work together. So let's look at the other point around global influence and what we can do as Africans to let the world know what we are doing. Okay, so there's so many things that we do across Africa. But what I find is there's no uniform voice. Nobody talks about it. Once the UK and the US have some groundbreaking education technology, you hear it everywhere. But in Africa, maybe the Kenyans might talk about theirs in Kenya, Nigeria might do theirs, but we're not united, right? So, for instance, platforms like Foodmates in South Africa and Neza in Kenya, they have built AI study tutors on WhatsApp and over text messages so that millions of students doing math and science questions can do this on their phone, right? Without internet, but no one's talking about it. We also have, let's look at Slum to School in Nigeria, right here in Lagos. And it's a remote school in a riverine community in Ekpe. Has anybody been there before? No? Okay. So what they have done is that they built a smart school using local materials, running on solar power, rainwater, etc. And they help kids gain up to 3 years of learning in a single year. And I also saw recently that they got an award for the top 10 finalists for the world's best school. This is a random school in the riverine area in Ekpe, and they were widely regarded as the World Cup of schools. So what I'm trying to say is that there's so many innovations happening in Africa, but nobody is talking about it. So how do we scale? How do we exert global influence if we're all working in silos? And then even if you look at Brent as well, with the online school, where African educators are delivering live quality instruction to students in UK, Europe, and North America. We're doing so much more, and we're really just not consumers of educational tools anymore. We are able to export, world-recognized innovations, but we are not talking about it enough. So let's flip the mindset. I know, when we search online, we're always checking for what Western EdTech thing is new and how do we adapt it for Nigeria. But can we flip it? How many times have you asked yourself, what breakthroughs from my classroom in Port Harcourt, in Lagos, in Accra, in Nairobi should the rest of the world be adopting? Why are we always so quick to adopt from others and not export our own ideas? So I just think that in Africa, as a continent, we're very, very resilient, right? We're very resourceful, as from the different examples I've, talked about today. And we also do community-based learning. If you look at Nigeria, all of us were doing lessons together as children. There's this whole community that comes together to ensure that every child succeeds. And that is really what we need in today's society. So, next slide. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is, when you have these conversations with an audience, I always like to have key action points that we can look at, once you go back to your different environments, right? So when we leave this conversation, I really want us to convert our shared vision into immediate and clear actions. Something that's simple, practical. So let me start with the policymakers. Are there any policymakers here? So, for instance, there's always this delay with government, bureaucracy, and etc. So we need to find a way to accelerate that, right? So if we want to bring an EdTech tool into a public school, we don't need to wait years for approval. We need to figure out how we can test it and how we can make it quicker. We should also look at the funding infrastructure and partnerships for even private institutions. And let's see how the government, we can work together to co-fund solar power, digital connectivity, connectivity hubs for primary and secondary schools. And then let's look at standardizing teacher accreditation. You know, we have all these different institutes that we train, but are we really training to the right standards? Can a teacher take that accreditation anywhere across Africa and hold it and say that they were trained properly in Nigeria and they have the right accreditations? Okay, for my EdTech founders, how are you supporting existing schools? What are you doing to ensure that physical schools can actually run better instead of coming in with the idea that tech can replace the schools? So that's something that we need to actively look at. We should also look at the offline piece as well. Can we create more offline tools that run on SMS, mobile data, or offline local Wi-Fi hubs for areas without internet? And then for organizations in the room, how can we link learning to jobs? How can we partner with local industries to build short practical skill programs and really help youth earn an income quickly? Then for my school leaders or my teachers or anybody who is education inclined, we need to focus on student growth. How do you really judge your school's success, not only by the high flyers, but also by the middle folks that you need to transform? And how can we really build school clusters, open classrooms? I know a lot of people said it's not possible. I think it can be possible in our context, depending on how we do it. But there's so much knowledge to be shared. Everybody's competing, no collaboration. We can do a lot more to collaborate in a way where it doesn't really stifle, the business that the school owners are running. Okay, so pretty much at the end. You can go to the next slide. So just to conclude, to every school leader, everyone interested in education in Nigeria or on the continent, when you go back home, just remember all the different things that I have said, and always remember what Nelson Mandela has told us time and time again, God rest his soul, that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So let's come together, let's build stronger systems, enough to nurture every child's gift, regardless of their socio-economic status. Let's bring together models that we can collaborate enough to scale across borders, and a united African voice that will be loud enough to shape the global future of learning. Thank you.